everyone, and welcome back to our YouTube series, The Big Analytics Query. I'm Tom, and today we are talking about data virtualization with our special guest, Ash Ward. Ash, welcome along.
Hello.
Why don't you introduce yourself for everyone?
Sure. My name is Ash. I've been working at Simpsons for just over 8 years now. Currently a lead consultant working in the public sector team and just doing lots of data analytics and whatever I fancy, really.
And
whatever
hopefully
comes in.
some data virtualization as well. Data virtualization, obviously what we're talking about today, sounds quite a broad term with lots of not much meaning in it. When we're talking about data virtualization, what are we saying? What does it mean?
It's all about taking your data, and normally you would, when you're doing sort of integrations or when you're doing some kind of data transformation on the data, you would create copies of that data up through the layers or across to other systems. But data virtualization is all about not doing that and just mapping the metadata. So creating those transformations virtually, and then the data only gets processed when you actually query the data.
So does that mean it's a lower compute method of data transformation in some ways?
It's kind of a different compute.
Yeah.
It means that the data is more real time. So instead of copying the data, once overnight, for example, or batching it throughout the day, and then it being live as of those snapshots, data virtualization, it goes to the sources directly. So the data is always live, but it means that the compute happens at query time rather than, batched up once overnight.
How do you do data virtualization? What tools can you do it in?
I suppose when I first started experimenting with virtualization, I used just SQL Server, just normal SQL Server, but it did involve staging the data first. But then to speed up delivery times, I would then just build a bunch of views on top of that, that staged data, and then that would virtualize it down.
So it's almost a kind of hybrid approach between the transformation of that staging layer, but also the virtualization with the views.
Yeah, exactly. But then you can, certainly on-prem SQL supports virtualization direct to source, so you can virtualize, and like I was describing before, it queries the source directly. But then we have used other tools, more sort of virtualization bespoke tools, if you like. Denodo is one that we've used a little bit internally.
And why would you do data virtualization? What's some of the real world benefits to it or applications for it?
There's a few applications. What I've described just then was more your traditional ETL data warehouse, data analytics type situation, but you can use it for integrations and also migrations. So in both those situations, although they're a little bit different, you kind of do the same thing. You can have the data virtualization layer sit in between your integration systems or sit above one system that you're trying to migrate. And it just adds a bit of flexibility. You can imagine if you're doing a migration from one system to another, if the schema changes, say like upgrading from a source from like one version to another version, if you've got the virtualization layer sat on top, when you switch the sources, it's easier to see where the schema's changed and what might affect your downstream tables.
So you've mentioned that with the kind of migration and some of the benefits. Are there any others that you particularly find when looking at data virtualization?
So particularly with the migration, it helps de-risk the whole process, having that integration sort of layer sat in between each of the versions of your migration. It can help speed up delivery. You're not having to create as complex pipelines and ETL and stuff. The views that you create are pretty simple. It's also quite good in terms of accessing real-time data. As soon as something changes in the source, you get that coming through. It can also help with security and governance. By pulling all your data into one place, it means you're governing it in one place. What we see a lot of is teams who are accessing data sources directly, and it means that the individual teams have the credentials to the sources, and normally they kind of have carte blanche to access all that data. So by bringing the data access into one place, it means it can be managed in one place, and you can just give people access to the data they need. Say like half a data source. Like a property team might only need access to like some of a social care system rather than like the rent type
rather
stuff.
than access to everything, and it allows you to use that least permissions or role of least permissions.
Yeah, principle of least privilege. Yeah.
You've mentioned lots of benefits. Who do you think should be using these tools of data virtualization?
The tools can be on the more expensive side, so I think it depends. I think it's probably suited to larger businesses, but it could be appropriate to like smaller businesses depending on what you're using it for.
Yeah.
If you're just using it as an ETL and analytics tool, then you're probably not going to get the most bang for your buck out of it. But if you're using it across the business to do a lot of things, if you're using it for migrations, using it for integrations, then you're going to see that cost fairly well spent. But if you've also paying for another separate data integration tool, you're kind of spending money twice.
So it's a great tool to do lots of different things, but if you're just wanting it as the ETL, maybe stick with what you've currently got, but rather than spend lots of money on different tools, data virtualization potentially could be an answer to have a kind of all-in-one solution.
Yeah, definitely. It's just when you are a smaller business, you're cutting it a bit finer.
Yeah,
so you need
absolutely.
to extract as much as you can, whereas a bigger business, they can easily get the money back.
Are there any other myths or things that you've experienced in data virtualization that you kind of think actually, it doesn't quite do that, or it does, that you want to share?
Sure. I think one of the big myths is that it completely replaces ETL entirely. But I would say that data virtualization and ETL can be quite similar, but also there's some sort of nuances between the two. Data virtualization does a form of ETL. I think ETL is quite a broad term, and data virtualization sits within it. But there's things that virtualization can't really handle, isn't that good for, like big data, for example. It's not particularly good for that, or like huge data sets. But it is good at getting sort of quick insights out of small to medium data sets. But what's good about it is it can sit alongside your sort of Hadoop MPP tools to handle big data, handle those larger data sets, but then integrate it with the other stuff.
So if you've been watching this and thinking data virtualization sounds the kind of thing that it's worth trying out, seeing if it's right for your organization, what would you recommend? What are some tools to start you on that journey?
So if you've got on-prem SQL Server, you can use that and use the virtualization within there. I suppose the risk is that you'll build some ETL, and then if you want to migrate that to the cloud later, Azure SQL doesn't support the same type of virtualization that you've got on-prem, so your stuff that you build might not be translatable. So that's worth bearing in mind. The tool that we've used a bit, Denodo, that does have a free trial, like a 30-day free trial thing.
Yeah.
And in Azure, you can spin up a virtual machine and bring your own license. Be wary that the virtual machine, you'll get charged for that in Azure, but the license, the Denodo license, you won't get charged for it as long as you're getting that free from Denodo.
Yeah.
And that's a fairly painless way to get going. If you did then want to run that more seriously, sort of long term, it is more cost efficient to get a license straight from Denodo rather than use the Azure licenses. I think because the billing is by the hour, it ends up costing you more. And then you might end up needing to do some more like network into your on-prem systems, or some other sort of configuration of the virtual machine itself, things like SSL and other bits and bobs. So there can be a few steps to get the platform set up and ready. But in terms of sort of just getting something up and having a play around, Visual SQL and the demo license, can get you a long way.
Well, thank you very much, Ash, for your wisdom and insight in joining us on this. And thank you for watching. If you've got any questions about any of the things we've said, then please do leave a question in the comments and we'll get back to you. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, bye.